any racist history with Donald Trump. He's a New Yorker, he has New York values. In the press during the campaign, there were accusations that he and his father were discriminating against black people in his properties when he was focused on the real estate market. Do you want to address that claim?
Sure. The discrimination laws in America since the 1960s can be interpreted in two ways and actually have two completely separate meanings. The first is what you would call discrimination in the old sense. Discrimination in the old sense is something like this. A white guy and a black guy apply for a job. The black guy is better qualified, the white guy gets the job. That is discrimination in the classic sense, right? In other words, you have the more qualified guy should get the job, the more qualified guy is African American, but the white guy gets the job even though he's less qualified. That's classic discrimination. If you actually look at housing discrimination suits, real estate lawsuits today, I would submit to you that out of 100 in the country, less than 5 are of that nature. Most of the discrimination suits in America today have to do with statistics. And statistics the argument goes something like this. At Walmart in Tulsa, Oklahoma, African Americans are 8% of the surrounding population, but they are only 4% of employees at Walmart. Therefore, Walmart is discriminating, and the EEOC will file, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, in conjunction with the Justice Department, will file a lawsuit. Now, I want to emphasize that this may be true or false, but it doesn't have anything to do with discrimination in the classic sense. What essentially is, there's an underlying assumption of proportional representation. And when that proportionality is violated, there's a presumption of discrimination and a burden on the part of the employer, or in this case the contractor, to prove why there is a numerical discrepancy between the ambient population and your workforce. If you look at the Trump lawsuits to look at what is the basis of the proof that he discriminated, you have foremen that said, blacks don't need to apply over here. We're not hiring any blacks. First of all, try getting away with something like this in New York City. It would be the death knell of Trump's company to even move in this direction. Most large companies have been sued for discrimination. Virtually no company is, over the past 30 years, completely exempt. Almost all companies have adopted various affirmative action plans in settlement of these suits. Sometimes the suits are for the purpose of getting those plans into place. I only mention this to say, to me, this is not a closed issue. This is an issue that if you want to make a case, you have to go into the concreteness of the evidence. It's not enough to say, hey, the Justice Department filed a suit, therefore Trump is discriminating. That is only the beginning of the inquiry and not the end of it. So look into it some more.
You can see she's going
With
on and on and on.
There
It's
looms
unbelievable.
over all of this the big national security worry.
Okay,
right?
is there a
The
way to
big,
fast forward to the part where she
almost
actually pulls the
existential
tax returns? Because she just goes
The greater
on
concern,
incessantly like this.
Donald Trump's
Up, still
tax
going.
returns
Nope.
to expose
Up, still going.
has decided to leak
Okay, here we go.
a portion of his 2005 tax return, which is how and why we got it tonight. And I am sure it is only the start, but it's a start. And our little piece of it, we just got it. We'll go through it. Next.
Okay, so, and then she goes to break, right? Get you through that commercial break. Finally, what does she reveal? What does she reveal? She reveals that Donald Trump in 2005 paid he had made $150 million in income, and he paid $38 million in taxes. Sad trombone. Because you know what they were hoping is that he never paid any taxes, right? You know what they were hoping is that he's declared a loss every year for all time, that he's not a billionaire. It turns out that $150 million to make in a year, that's a lot of money. The average household income in the United States is somewhere around $56,000. So if you were to earn that average household income for 2,600 years, you wouldn't hit $150 million. He made that in 1 year. So number one, Trump is super duper rich. Well done, Rachel Maddow. You've broken the story. You've got the silver bullet. Donald Trump is no longer president. It's unbelievable. I love when she says, but it is a start. As though she's actually going to break something, and then she breaks that he just made a crap load of money and paid a crap load of money in taxes. And that's the other part, right? He paid $38 million in taxes. $38 million, okay? That's a lot of money. $38 million is a crap in 1 year in taxes. Not only that, his effective tax rate that year was 25%. You know what Barack Obama's effective tax rate was in 2015? It was 19%. You know what Bernie Sanders' effective tax rate was in 2014? It was 13%. You know what Comcast, which owns NBC, you know what their effective average tax rate has been from 2008 to 2012? 24%. In other words, Donald Trump, in this 1 year of tax returns that they have, paid more as a percentage of his income than any of the people that I just mentioned. But they've been saying for years that he paid none, like zero taxes, none. So what did they come up with? I love this. What did they come up with to try and spin this as though Trump did something wrong? Well, you know, Trump only paid that much in taxes because of the alternative minimum tax. The alternative minimum tax is this idiotic tax provision that basically catches you. If you have a lot of deductions and you make a lot of money, then it basically jacks your rate back up. And Trump wants to get rid of that because he says that's not fair. You know, you're basically, it's just a money grab. And say, well, if Trump had his way, he would have paid not very much in taxes at all. Right, and if I had my way, I'd pay nothing in taxes, legally, because the fact is that I don't want to pay all my money to the government. The government sucks. But I love this. They're going nuts over this. My God, it's just unbelievable. Okay, this was the giantest fail, the giantest media fail since Geraldo Rivera opened Al Capone's vault.
It's great to see you this morning.
Good morning.
So importing a lot of Syrian refugees is one of those ideas that everyone we know is totally in favor of. Everyone in the press, everyone in politics, all the business community, everyone who's rich and well-educated and insulated from the effects of this policy is totally for it because it makes us all feel virtuous. Why don't you explain to me crisply why an unemployed machinist in Cleveland would be for this? What does he get out of this?
Well, it's actually quite simple. First thing, this is something that we've been doing for about 64 years. We're part of an international treaty that brings in refugees, and we actually bring in far fewer than most of the world, especially when it comes to Syrian refugees. You know, thinking about it in a really basic way, it takes the burden off of these other countries. The great thing about our country is that we are separated by an ocean, so they have to go through 5 screening agencies: the Department of Defense, State Department, Homeland Security, the UN, and one other that I forgot.
Okay, so I disagree with almost everything you said, but you still haven't answered my question, which is, why should the average American taxpayer who's not rich, who's not benefiting from the current status quo, see this as good for him or her?
Well, number one, it comes out cost neutral in the end. They're forced to reimburse their own flights. They have to take employment. They're heavily screened.
False. But leaving aside the falseness of what you said, why is it good? Why should the average person, the powerless person, the kind of person who's not for this, currently being lectured by the elites, why should that person be for this? What do Americans get out of this?
So what's going on right now is they don't have a firm screening process in Europe right now. They're coming in over little boats, and they can't screen them, and they're going through multiple countries. The EU does not have a handle on this. We are not accepting, it's a 36-month waiting period. We are not accepting it at the refugees at the rate that these countries are, and they're going through screening. And so what that does is it lessens the burden. When there's more screening coming from our country, it makes it a safer process.
So it makes this country safer to import Syrian refugees. That's what you're saying?
Well, when they're screened multiple times,
but it makes it safer than it is without them?
You know, if the visa problem is where we have the problem.
But why have any problem at all? Like, what is the point of this? Well, I know it makes rich people feel virtuous and welcoming to bring in others and then shift the burden to ordinary Americans. But why is it good for those ordinary Americans? I'm still confused. Because the government exists on their behalf, right?
Because there is a problem in Europe right now, and they're coming through Europe without the screening. And so when you lessen that burden and they go through actual screening, we've never had a refugee, never had a terrorist come in through a refugee program. We had them through visa process, which is a problem. But the refugees...
So it's good for Germany, which destroyed its country by opening the borders. I get that. It's good for tons of other countries. I totally get that. But American taxpayers have got to be expected to care about their own country first, shouldn't they?
I understand the taxpayer argument, but they've actually done studies on this to show that it's neutral, because they take jobs, they have to take jobs, they have to pay taxes, they're reimbursing flight costs, and a lot of the costs that you would think are part of the budget. So it ends up being cost neutral.
But we have massive unemployment in this country, massive.
I know, massive.
Our workforce participation rate is the lowest since the 70s. So why at a time when ordinary people who want to work can't find jobs, why would we be helping people from other countries get those jobs?
Well, that's a business problem. That has nothing to do.
That's a social and
well, when you
social
have
problem.
Companies going overseas and settling overseas and taking jobs away from America, that's a problem.
But you just said the U.S. government is bringing people in and requiring them to get jobs that presumably some Americans would like. Why is that good for Americans?
You know, unfortunately, in a lot of these situations, they're low-level jobs like McDonald's, and you know, these are the types of jobs that they're getting that most Americans, especially educated Americans, which, you know, is a higher and higher rate every year, and those who are unemployed, are not taking. So the jobs that we Americans are not taking anymore, or that we've left to younger people, or, you know, people who are retirees. So it actually ends up being a cost.
So the black youth unemployment rate is like the highest in my lifetime. So you would say to them, sorry, it's going to a Syrian refugee?
I think you're jumping from one extreme to another, Tucker.
Seems related.
are you surprised at all? You know, some say, listen, this administration's been very careful about its relationship to the Muslim community and wanting to build bridges. Some say, though, now, when we're talking about these specific individuals, that there are specific words that would be appropriate to use. The White House says no.
Well, President Obama has systematically, since he came into office, avoided calling anything relating to Islam and terrorism together. As soon as he became president in 2009, he changed the threat assessment plan for the nation and took out every word relating to Islam, Islamic radicalism, Islamic terrorism, jihad, or jihadism. In 2010, he purged all our counterterrorism training manuals out of anything referring to radical Islam the same way as he did with the threat assessment plan. President Obama is on a mission to protect the image of Islam because he believes that protecting the image of Islam is very important to him because he was born into the Muslim faith, raised by a devout Muslim father in an Islamic country whom he idealized, and he feels he does not want to give a bad image to Islam, and he's more concerned about protecting the image of Islam than protecting the people of the United States.
And Brigitte, to be clear, I mean, he had very little contact with his father, but we know he was grew up all over the world and has different viewpoints maybe than the average American would have. Alan, though, at this point, though, with these guys specifically being caught on film making specific statements, what would it hurt for the White House to be able to say, in this case, these people are radicalized Islamic terrorists?
It's not Islamic. And by the way, Obama's father was an atheist, and he didn't have much contact with his father, as you pointed out, Shannon. The word Islamic terrorism, those words should not be used together. It's not Islamic. And let me quote Malek Mirabay, the brother of Ahmed Mirabay, who was the police officer, the Muslim who was killed in Paris just last week, who said that Islam is a religion of peace and that mad people have neither color nor religion. These are false Muslims. And to say that this is Islamic or that this is Muslim would be the same thing as saying that Christians who kill people at abortion clinics are representing Christianity. That's not Christian. When you act like that, you are not acting in the name of any faith. You may think you are. You may use those words, but that's not Christianity, and this is not Islam.
Well, and Brigitte, to that,
big difference.
To that point, let me say this, though, that today that in the briefing, Josh Earnest said, basically to call them that would be to justify their explanation for what they're doing. And he's saying that they don't want to give them that justification and that they don't want to give them that label that maybe the killers were seeking, but that aren't, as Alan argues, accurate. What do you say?
Well, we can have our own justification and we can have our own opinion. The truth is the truth and reality is reality. The book of the Quran commands these jihadists to do exactly what they're doing. The verses in the Quran are very clear at the end of the Quran. All the violent verses abrogated all the peaceful verses in the beginning of the Quran. This is why the law is on the side of the radicals. So what the radicals are doing are not a twisted version of the Quran. They have not hijacked the Quran. They are following in the footsteps of Prophet Muhammad. The sooner we can recognize this reality and have the courage to utter those words and deal with the problem, the sooner we win this fight.
Who gets to discriminate? And where would it stop? What if it was a Jewish wedding? Okay, no, bear with me. And the floor said, I don't want to participate in that kind of religious system.
I would find another florist happily.
Yeah, okay. But once we set that kind of precedence, where will it end? And I think, you know,
with them going out of business. Because everybody will find another florist. That's where it'll end.
No, that's all cute. That's all cute.
That's not cute. That's real.
No.
Why do you, the lunch counter protests against the lunch counter protests that are so famous in the civil rights movement occurred as a voluntary boycott in the early 60s, long before the civil rights movement, and it integrated. They integrated the business because of that. Capitalism discriminates against no color, no creed, and no sexuality. They want the cash.
Integration was done by force.
Yeah.
Against
state government.
Most whites did not want to
you live a very comfortable life. If you're going to talk about civil rights, so, let's talk about what happened for people trying to get served.
Let's make sure we're hearing
against state governments that were compelling segregation.
One second, Ben. Let's make sure we're hearing each other. What was it that, Ben, you concluded with? It was
It was Woolworths that was voluntarily.
It was state governments.
What I was saying there is that state governments were the source of segregation in the first place. People who think that Jim Crow was a voluntary system in which people just decided that they wanted to segregate their businesses are incorrect. There were Jim Crow laws on the books. The law in the state of Alabama is that you needed a 7-foot-high wall in your restaurant. Okay, this idea that the government always has clean hands and that it's individuals who are the problem, and that capitalism, in the absence of government compulsion, is not the solution to discrimination, must have missed the last 50-odd years of history in this country.
Let's have the Reverend. You had something.
I think, you know, Ben, the enormous inequality in our economic system is in part because of your divine term, freedom. And to think that, okay, hey, bear with me, to think that freedom is always the answer. It's always the answer, isn't it?
Hold up. I would like to.
History, folks.
Why do you believe that government compulsion is always the answer? Read history.
You turn, okay, Ben, this is great. I should use your trick because government is always the problem. It is always the problem.
Pretty much.
Frankly, friend, Jefferson created the possibility of a constitution that allowed for your religious liberties. That is not the problem.
My religious liberties, and the founders believe this, were secured by the government
was created
on behalf of
for
God.
the sake of your freedom.
It was created for the sake of my freedom, but it doesn't get to curtail my freedom.
And the government guarantees it, and if we don't have policemen, firemen, it would be chaos.
Of course that's true, but the minute that the government infringes on my freedom, it becomes irrelevant and it becomes unconstitutional, and this is, Jefferson didn't just institute a government, he rebelled against one.
So what is your complaint with Mr. Cohn?
Right, so historically we've had many grievances with Gary Cohn. So he's one of the board members who, you know, is the reason why we have $62,000 per year in tuition, you know. And so the Board of Trustees, without any kind of democratic student input, every 2 years decides on tuition increases.
Right.
And so historically we've had student movements to try and get a tuition freeze at the very least. And so tuition will stop rising. But the Board of Trustees has met every single movement with disdain. They don't listen to the students. And so this is one in a long line of events that
Well, let me just say, I'm with you. I just want to raise my voice in agreement with you. Schools are too expensive. You don't get your money's worth. But they're all that price, basically. I mean, all schools, all private universities are in that same range. And Gary Cohn's giving money to the school, which in effect subsidizes tuitions rather than raise them. I mean, he is a trustee. He gives a lot of money to the school by definition. Your complaint in this case seems to be that he met with Donald Trump. And I wonder if that's a crime, and should it be?
No, I mean, it's not a crime to meet with somebody, obviously. But I think it is evident of a conflict of interest, perhaps not legally a conflict of interest, but it signifies that the same order that has caused students to go into lifelong debt is now, you know, slowly meeting with Trump, and it's going to continue to raise tuition, and it's an unsustainable model for the university.
Okay. I mean, again, I agree with what you're saying, but on the one hand, but on the other, I mean, tuitions have risen through 8 years of the Obama administration. Trump isn't even president yet, and I don't think you'd be protesting someone who met with Obama. It looks a little like McCarthyism. I don't know if they teach you that in school, but that's the idea that associating with someone is the same as sharing his views. Al Gore met today with Donald Trump. You're not protesting Al Gore, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think you're simplifying it a bit too much. One, historically, Gary Cohn's been a very strong factor in the Board of Trustees not listening to students, not only in tuition, but in many other factors as well, such as sexual assault on campus. And so the Board of Trustees doesn't take action that helps students, in part because of Gary Cohn, but also because of factors in the way that the university is set up as a whole, the whole bureaucratic system of the university, not just specific to American University, but
no, it's not. And again, I'm not here to defend Gary Cohn, whom I don't know, or to Goldman Sachs, or the American University Board, which I'm sure is as bad as you say it is. But I'm looking now at the statement that you put out on Facebook, which is dump Trump, fire Cohn. And of course, you can't fire Cohn because he's not paid. He's paying for the job, right? But you accuse him of collaborating with the fossil fuel business, and I'm quoting, and other oppressive industries. And then you say he's beholden to big oil. So it suggests that anybody with any connection to fossil fuels is committing a sin. That's basically what you're saying in the statement. And I'm wondering, aren't we all? I mean, didn't you take a car to the studio tonight? Isn't that a high moral standard for you as a student to be setting for others?
No, I don't think so. And again, because there's a tradition specifically at American University, although, you know, there are tons of universities in the U.S. that have started fossil-free movements, so universities divest from fossil fuel investments in their endowment. And so there are screens you can do in, you know, whoever sets up your portfolio that can screen out fossil fuel companies.
Right, but you would do that because you think it's...
at American University, there's been a movement for the past 3 years, 4 years, to do that. And again, it's been met with complete disdain, even though a large amount of students support it.
Well, I can identify with the disdain, though, coming from any citizen who flies on a plane, who uses a gas range, who drives in any kind of motor vehicle that's not a Tesla. If it is a moral crime to participate in fossil fuels at any level, again, aren't you a hypocrite? I mean, and don't you personally, and I'm not attacking you, I'm merely saying if you're setting the standard to that height, can you pass the test? I don't think you can.
No, you know, it's reaching a bit far, Tucker.
Really? To live by your own standards? That's an impossible dream for you?
We're talking about a structural issue. And so, you know, because I have a plastic bottle of water right next to me doesn't mean I'm suddenly equal in terms of, you know, guilt compared to fossil fuel companies.
So here's the point I guess I want you to ponder, though, Gray.
Structural issues need to be met with structural demands, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Because they don't demand anything of us. We can be upset about something we call a structural inequality without actually making personal changes. We can feel holy. We can consider them sinful. But here's my question to you. Don't you think it's a mistake to frame all political differences as moral differences? That's what I see in the statement. I don't see you trying to argue against Gary Cohn's points of view, whatever those are, or Donald Trump's for that matter. You're instead calling them names and saying it's somehow sinful to be engaged or involved with them. I mean, that's the opposite of a dialogue, isn't it? That's more like a religious expression, it seems to me.
No, I think you have to maybe figure out the reasons why people are protesting Gary Cohn, but also other people who are close with Trump or being considered by Trump a bit more broadly than a Facebook description of an event. And so,
it's your Facebook page.
There's a historical, I didn't write it, but there's a historical tradition at American University where the students have many grievances with Gary Cohn, and so that's specific to American University.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, you know, there's many factors, not just because somebody meets with somebody, why he would be protesting. It's like, you know, we're ignoring the fact that Gary Cohn's the president of Goldman Sachs, who benefits from exorbitant student loans.
Right. It doesn't mention that perhaps because economic issues are too complicated for the students. All right, you know, we're out of time, Gray. I appreciate. I'm doing my best to understand.
Extorting students for money.